The Vorthak Council had seen many species surrender. Some begged. Others bargained. A few even tried to fight back with their primitive weapons and laughable tactics. But none, absolutely none, had ever made Admiral Kex'thul question his 4 centuries of military experience quite like this. "Sir, the human vessel is still approaching," reported Lieutenant Zilnara, her voice trembling slightly as she stared at the tactical display. The bridge of the Vorthak flagship Dominator's edge hummed with nervous energy. Kex'thul's 6 eyes focused on the view screen, watching the tiny speck grow larger. One ship. One pathetic, barely functional human ship limping toward their entire battle fleet. 47 vessels. The pride of the Vorthak Empire. Ships that had conquered 17 star systems and reduced countless civilizations to cosmic dust. Has she responded to our surrender demand? Kex'thul asked, his mandibles clicking with what he assumed was amusement. This would be over soon. Another species added to the Empire's long list of the conquered. Negative, sir. In fact. Zilnara paused, checking her console twice. She's broadcasting something on all frequencies. Put it through. The bridge speakers crackled to life, and a distinctly human voice filled the command center. Female. Young. And carrying a tone that made Kex'thul's secondary heart skip a beat. Attention Vorthak fleet. This is Captain Maya Stellaris of the Earth vessel Defiant Hope. I'm here to discuss terms. The bridge erupted in clicking laughter. Several officers had to steady themselves against their stations. Terms? One human ship against their entire armada wanted to discuss terms? This is rich, muttered Commander Vexhai from the weapons station. Should we simply vaporize her now, or let her finish her comedy routine first? But Kex'thul wasn't laughing. Something in the human's voice bothered him. There was no fear. No desperation. Just confidence. Cold, calculating confidence. Tell her she has 2 minutes to surrender unconditionally, or we'll demonstrate why the Vorthak Empire has never lost a battle, Kex'thul commanded. The response came immediately. Admiral, with respect, you're about to lose your first one. I suggest you listen carefully. The laughter died. Every eye on the bridge turned to the view screen where the human ship continued its steady approach. It was small, maybe a tenth the size of their smallest frigate. Its hull showed obvious battle damage, scorch marks and patched holes that suggested this vessel had seen serious combat. Sir, Zilnara's voice was barely a whisper. Long-range sensors are detecting anomalies. What kind of anomalies? The human ship's power signature is wrong. It's generating 17 times more energy than its size should allow. And there's something else. The quantum field around her vessel is fluctuating in patterns I've never seen before. Kex'thul's confidence wavered. In 4 centuries of conquest, he'd learned to trust his instincts. Right now, those instincts were screaming warnings. Captain Stellaris, he said, opening a direct channel. You're outnumbered 47-1. Your ship is damaged. Your species is primitive. Explain to me why you believe you can negotiate from a position of strength. The response came with what sounded suspiciously like a chuckle. Because, Admiral, you're thinking like a Vorthak. You see numbers. Fleet strength. Conventional tactics. That's why your species has been so successful against everyone else. But here's the thing about humans we discovered during our recent unpleasantness with the Zirian Collective. A pause. Every being on the bridge held their breath. We don't fight fair. Before Kex'thul could respond, his tactical officer's voice cut through the tension like a plasma blade. Sir. Energy surge from the human vessel. She's launching something. The view screen shifted to tactical view. A single projectile, barely visible, streaked away from the human ship. Not toward the Vorthak fleet, but toward the nearby asteroid field they'd been using as cover. One missile. Vexhai laughed. What's she planning to do, mine some more? The explosion answered his question. The entire asteroid field simply vanished. Not destroyed. Not shattered. It vanished, leaving behind a perfectly spherical void in space where thousands of tons of rock had existed moments before. The bridge fell silent except for the hum of life support systems. What? Kex'thul's voice cracked. What was that? Humans call it a Singularity torpedo, Captain Stellaris replied cheerfully. We developed it after the Zirions made the mistake of glassing Mumbai. Turns out, when you really upset humans, they get creative with physics. That particular weapon creates a micro black hole that exists for exactly 3.7 seconds. Long enough to consume whatever it hits, short enough to evaporate safely. Zilnara's readings confirm the impossible. Sir, quantum analysis indicates the torpedo actually generated a contained gravitational singularity. The theoretical energy requirements alone should have what, Lieutenant? Stellaris interrupted, somehow having intercepted their internal communications. Should have been impossible? That's the thing about humans, Admiral. We specialize in impossible. Kex'thul's mind raced. The Vorthak Empire had encountered dozens of species with advanced technology. Energy weapons, shields, faster-than-light travel. But this? This was something else entirely. How many of those weapons do you have? He asked, though he dreaded the answer. Enough. The human's voice carried a smile he could hear across the void. But here's what I find interesting, Admiral. Your species has conquered 17 systems. Subjugated millions of beings. Built an empire on fear and superior firepower. But you've never faced a species that fights back with pure, concentrated spite. The human ship had stopped its approach, holding position just outside the effective range of Vorthak weapons. Which, Kex'thul realized with growing horror, meant she knew exactly what their weapons' capabilities were. You see, Admiral, humans have this peculiar trait. When someone hurts us, we don't just fight back. We innovate. We adapt. We find ways to hurt you that you never saw coming. The Zirions learned this lesson 6 months ago when they tried to invade our system. What happened to the Zirions? Kex'thul asked, though part of him didn't want to know. They don't exist anymore, Stellaris replied matter-of-factly. Turns out, when you threaten humanity's home, humans develop some very interesting ideas about warfare. Would you like to hear about our relativistic kill vehicles? Or perhaps you'd prefer to know about the quantum virus we developed that can rewrite matter at the subatomic level? The bridge crew exchanged terrified glances. Kex'thul had heard rumors about the Zirion collective's sudden disappearance, but he'd assumed they'd simply withdrawn to regroup. You're bluffing, he said, though his voice lacked conviction. Am I? The human ship's engines flared, and it began moving again. Not toward the Vorthak fleet, but in a wide circle around them. Tell me, Admiral, how many ships have you lost to engine failures in the past month? Kex'thul's blood ran cold. 3 vessels had suffered catastrophic engine failures in recent weeks. Accidents, they'd assumed. Maintenance issues. The quantum virus is quite elegant, Stellaris continued conversationally. It spreads through subspace communications. Every time your ships communicate with each other, they exchange infected data packets. The virus lies dormant until activated remotely. Then it causes certain metals to decay at the molecular level. Impossible, Vexhai sputtered. Our communication systems are completely secure. Are they? Stellaris asked sweetly. Then explain why I'm listening to your bridge conversations right now. Or why I know Admiral Kex'thul has 6 eyes, 4 arms, and a rather impressive collection of Altarian war medals in his private quarters. The silence stretched like a taut wire ready to snap. Here's what's going to happen, the human continued, her tone shifting to something colder, more dangerous. You're going to withdraw from this system. You're going to leave the Kalari people alone. And you're going to spread the word throughout your empire that Earth is off limits. And if we refuse? Then I activate the virus in your ship's engines, and 47 vessels become 47 expanding clouds of superheated gas. After that, I go home and tell my people that the Vorthak Empire has chosen to join the Zirions in extinction. Kex'thul stared at the view screen, watching the tiny human ship continue its lazy orbit around his fleet. One ship. One human. And somehow, she held the power to destroy everything he'd spent centuries building. You're asking me to believe that one human can threaten the entire Vorthak Empire? Admiral, Stellaris said, and for the first time, there was genuine warmth in her voice. I'm not threatening your empire. I'm giving you the chance to save it. The words hung in the air like a death sentence, the silence on the bridge stretched for what felt like an eternity. Kex'thul found himself in the most impossible position of his military career, staring at a tactical display that showed overwhelming numerical superiority while knowing, deep in his gut, that they were somehow outmatched. Sir, Zilnara whispered, her voice barely audible. Incoming transmission from the Vorthak High Command. Perfect. Just what he needed. The council demanding explanations while a single human held his entire fleet hostage with threats that sounded like science fiction but felt disturbingly real. Put them through. Private channel. The holographic image of Supreme Commander Kex'thul materialized, his scarred face twisted with impatience. Admiral, explain why your fleet has been sitting motionless for the past 20 minutes instead of completing the conquest of this system. Kex'thul glanced at his tactical display, where the human ship continued its leisurely orbit. How exactly did one explain this situation to a superior officer without sounding completely insane? Supreme Commander, we've encountered complications. What kind of complications require 47 warships to hesitate? Before Kex'thul could respond, Captain Stellaris' voice cut through their supposedly secure channel. Hello, Supreme Commander. Captain Maya Stellaris, Earth Defense Force. I was just explaining to your Admiral here why the Vorthak Empire might want to reconsider its expansion plans. Kex'thul's expression shifted from impatience to fury. How is this primitive communicating on our secured frequency? Oh, that's simple, Stellaris replied cheerfully. We've been monitoring your communications for months. Amazing what you can learn when you hack into a civilization's entire network infrastructure. Did you know your military uses the same encryption protocols as your civilian weather satellites? That's adorable. The Supreme Commander's face darkened. Admiral, destroy that ship immediately. I wouldn't recommend that, Stellaris interjected. See, I've been having a lovely conversation with Admiral Kex'thul about the unfortunate fate of the Zirion Collective. They tried the destroy the human ship approach. It didn't work out well for them. You're bluffing, Kex'thul snarled. The Zirions were a powerful empire. One human ship couldn't possibly, Supreme Commander, with respect, you're suffering from the same cognitive bias that doomed the Zirions. You're thinking in terms of conventional warfare. Fleet size. Firepower. Territorial advantage. But humans learned something important during our first contact with hostile aliens. Stellaris paused, and when she continued, her voice carried an edge that made Kex'thul's skin crawl. We learned that the universe is full of bullies who think might makes right. And humans have very strong opinions about bullies. On the view screen, the human ship suddenly changed course, accelerating directly toward the Vorthak formation. Alarm klaxons wailed across the bridge. She's on a collision course. Vexhai shouted. Impact in 90 seconds. All ships, evasive maneuvers. Kex'thul ordered. But even as he spoke, he knew something was wrong. The human ship was small and fast, but ramming a Vorthak dreadnought would be suicide. Relax, Admiral, Stellaris said, sounding amused. I'm not planning to ram you. I'm planning to demonstrate something far more interesting. The human vessel streaked past the Vorthak flagship, close enough that Kex'thul could see the detail of its scarred hull. As it passed, something detached from its underside. Something small and innocuous that drifted toward the nearest Vorthak cruiser. What was that? Kex'thul demanded. A present, Stellaris replied. We call it a Nano-Forge. It's about the size of a dinner plate, and it contains roughly 10 billion self-replicating machines programmed with one simple instruction: disassemble whatever they touch and build more of themselves. The object made contact with the cruiser's hull. For a moment, nothing happened. Then, slowly, a section of the ship's armor began to change. The metal seemed to flow like liquid, reshaping itself into complex geometric patterns. Fascinating technology, Stellaris continued conversationally. The nanobots can convert any matter into more nanobots. They're solar-powered, so they never run out of energy. And they're programmed to stop replicating once they've consumed exactly one starship worth of material. The affected cruiser's captain was screaming orders over the comm system, but there was nothing his crew could do. The nanobots spread across the hull like a metallic cancer, consuming the ship's structure and converting it into billions of microscopic machines. Of course, Stellaris added, I can modify their programming remotely. Instead of stopping at one ship, I could program them to consume, let's say an entire fleet. Or a planet. Or a solar system. The choice is really up to you. Kex'thul watched in horror as the cruiser continued to dissolve. Within minutes, nothing remained but a cloud of glittering particles that slowly dispersed into space. 600 crew members. Gone. You're insane, Kex'thul whispered. No, Supreme Commander. I'm human. There's a difference, though I admit it's sometimes hard to tell. Stellaris's voice carried a laugh that chilled Kex'thul's blood. The Zirions made the same mistake you're making. They assumed that because humans are relatively new to the galactic community, we'd be easy to intimidate. They were wrong. What do you want? Kex'thul asked, cutting through Kex'thul's sputtering rage. I want you to leave. All of you. Withdraw from this system and never return. The Kalari people are under Earth's protection now. Impossible, Kex'thul snapped. The Vorthak Empire doesn't negotiate with terrorists. Terrorists? Stellaris sounded genuinely surprised. Supreme Commander, you've invaded 17 star systems. You've enslaved millions of beings. You've committed genocide against at least 4 species that I know of. And you're calling me a terrorist for defending innocent people? The human ship had completed its orbit and was now positioned directly between the Vorthak fleet and the planet below. One small vessel protecting an entire world. Here's what's going to happen, Stellaris continued, her tone shifting to something cold and final. You have exactly 10 minutes to begin your withdrawal. If you're not moving by then, I'll activate the nano-forges I've attached to each of your ships. What? Kex'thul frantically checked his sensors. Sir, I'm detecting multiple small objects attached to our hull. When did she? While you were all watching the demonstration, Stellaris replied helpfully. Humans are quite good at misdirection. Magic tricks, sleight of hand, that sort of thing. Turns out those skills translate surprisingly well to space combat. Kex'thul stared at his tactical display, trying to process what he was seeing. 46 remaining ships, each compromised by devices they'd never detected. One human who'd somehow outmaneuvered his entire fleet while having a casual conversation. You can't be serious, he said. Admiral, I'm going to share something with you that might help you understand humans better. When the Zirions attacked our system, they destroyed a city called Mumbai. 12 million people died in 30 seconds. Do you know what humans did next? Kex'thul didn't answer. We grieved. We mourned. We held memorial services for the dead. And then we got to work. It took us 6 months to develop the technology to completely erase the Zirion collective from existence. 6 months from, we're under attack, to problem solved forever. That's not military efficiency, Supreme Commander. That's human nature. The bridge fell silent except for the countdown timer that Zilnara had started. 8 minutes remaining. The thing about humans, Stellaris continued, is that we're remarkably peaceful for a species that's so good at violence. We prefer diplomacy, trade, cultural exchange. We want to be friends with everyone. But when someone hurts us, when someone threatens innocent people under our protection, we become something else entirely. What do you become? Kex'thul asked, though he was afraid of the answer. We become inevitable. The word hung in the void like a death sentence. Kex'thul looked around his bridge, seeing the fear in every face. These were warriors who'd conquered systems, beings who'd never known defeat. Now they were terrified of one human in a damaged ship. Sir, Zilnara whispered. 5 minutes remaining. Kex'thul made his decision. All ships, prepare for withdrawal. Set course for the outer system. Admiral. Kex'thul roared. I forbid this cowardice. Supreme Commander, with respect, you're not here. I am. And I'm not going to sacrifice 46 ships and 30,000 crew members to satisfy your pride. The Vorthak fleet began to move, slowly turning away from the planet. As they did, Stellaris spoke one final time. Admiral, you've made the right choice. The Kalari people will remember this day. So will Earth. You've shown wisdom where others showed only arrogance. Will you really let us leave? Kex'thul asked. Of course. Humans keep their word. But Admiral, make sure your empire understands something. Earth is watching now. We know about the Vorthak Empire. We know about your expansion plans. And we know about every species living under your oppression. The human ship was already turning away, heading back toward the planet. The galaxy is changing, Admiral. The age of conquest is ending. The age of consequence has begun. As the Vorthak fleet retreated, Kex'thul watched the tiny human vessel disappear into the planet's atmosphere. One ship. One human. One impossible victory that would reshape the balance of power in the galaxy. In the days that followed, the story would spread through every communication network, every trade route, every diplomatic channel. The Vorthak Empire, unstoppable for centuries, had retreated from a single human ship. The myth of Vorthak invincibility was shattered, but more importantly, the galaxy had learned something new about humans. They were no longer the primitive species struggling to find their place among the stars. They were something far more dangerous, they were protectors. And they were done asking permission.